Hi, my name is Michaela Luders. I am a member of BeBold, and tonight we are very lucky. We have Sheila Lambert here. She is here to talk to us about the social pressures teens face as they go to college and determining if your teen is going to be ready for college, what you can do. She's going to discuss different parenting styles that can affect how prepared your child will be for college. And she has a lot of firsthand experience to base all this information on. She has been in higher education for over 30 years. She was previously the director of wellness at Southern New Hampshire University, and she currently has her own practice, among other many things she has done. So thank you. We feel very lucky to have you and are looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It's great to be here, not only to talk about such a passionate topic of mine, but to be in Bedford. I am a former Bedford resident of over 20 years plus. About a year ago, we moved up to Lake Winnipesaukee, and I often come back here to visit friends and my mother and my family. And when I was asked to come speak to what I believe is my community and my peer group, I was thrilled. So thanks for having me. I have been in the higher education field for about half of the 30 years, but the full 30 years with mental health and substance abuse issues. And I first started my career out working in more treatment programs, and when I started understanding a little bit more about the recovery world, I started understanding that we can work a little bit more on the prevention end to help people to get to that point. So I started investigating how I can learn a little bit more and work with the clientele around the prevention end, and then I stumbled upon a wonderful opportunity at UNH, and that's what began my career. And that's a little bit of what started what I'm about to talk about today, is looking at individual students' attitudes and behaviors on college campuses, and how we as adults, as parents, as peers, as members of a community can contribute negatively or positively to that. So my goal, I'm going to be walking back and forth because I do not have a clicker, so let's hope I don't fall. My goals for today are to talk about what parents and students can be doing to prepare themselves for entering college. And I'm not talking about how much to pack for their first year in the dorm, which is usually for girls much more than for boys. Not to do that. We can talk about that after. It's really to talk about what kind of conversations can parents and students be having about this important issue. I'm going to talk about how to navigate media and how media can negatively impact what we believe and how we engage with our children, or I always say students, our students, and how to help best guide them in the right way. So the conversations we're going to delve into a little bit. I do have some real specific recommendations for parents around what you can specifically talk to your child about right now, before the school year ends, during the summer, and in preparation for the big adventure off in the fall. I will be bringing in some data, not only national data from American College Health, but also some New Hampshire schools data that the New Hampshire schools work collaboratively together to gain in order to educate community members like yourself, as well as campuses, and to help work on more reality versus misperception. So we'll delve a little bit into that. I'm not going to spend too much time, but I do have resources for you on that. And then we're going to do a little self-assessment on what kind of parenting style we all have, if you're here as a parent, and how a couple of different prominent parenting styles could contribute to a student not being as successful as we want them to. All of that in a short amount of time, I know, but I will do my best to do a review. I certainly encourage questions, but we will have time at the end for questions and answers. And I might even ask you to give me some answers. Okay. All right, so what comes to your mind when you hear college? Tell me some words that, as you sit here, come to your mind.
Freedom.
Freedom.
Say independent.
Independence, freedom, yes. What are some other things? Growing up. What?
Fear.
Fear, yeah, of course. I think parents and students both have fear. What are some other? Parties. Absolutely.
Lack of communication.
Lack of communication, okay. Everyone comes from a different place. Cost, yes, absolutely. Let's raise our hand on that. Everyone comes from a different place, right? We come from a different background. We come from a different culture. Some of our students are entering college as first-generation students, so they're developing their own sense of what college is about. We got to remember that the things that we think about college could be, but some of what we think about college is somewhat of a misperception for some of us, depending upon what we're looking at and what information we're gathering. So things that you've mentioned, independence, right? Partying was mentioned. That's definitely, how do people connect partying with college? Through what sources? Movies. Animal House did a really good job at helping us to shape that. What are some other ways that we might get that kind of a perception? Social media nowadays, when we were going to school, we didn't have social media, so we didn't have that, but parents and students and the community are both put in positions of seeing different things on social media. And what gets put on social media? Or what is on advertisements in the middle of the games?
Alcohol.
More of the glamorization of alcohol. So you're seeing the person on TV, with maybe dressed up with a martini at the bar, or maybe you're seeing a college party and people laughing and having fun. What aren't we seeing on Instagram, on Facebook, or on TV? The consequences. We're not seeing the vomiting. We're not seeing the missed classes. We're not seeing getting in trouble. We're seeing the other pieces. So that's part of what our students are hearing. They're hearing this from their siblings, friends who are going to college. They're not only hearing it through that avenue, but they're seeing it on different social media, like we said. So it is important for us to understand that, so that as we delve through tonight, we can then understand what's important to talk to our students about. Sometimes the word fraternity or sorority is connected to what college is about. Again, I think that's just from people's background. Athletics. How many students work really, really hard over the years through club sports, through travel sports, and try and get into some good athletic programs in our universities around here and nationwide? Of course, a lot of students do. Athletics is considered one as well as freshmen, as well as Greek and fraternity members, as a high-risk community of a student attending school around partying and drinking. Academics is another word, hopefully, that comes to everyone's minds when it comes to college, right? And then involvement. Involvement in the community is another one that sometimes people say is one of the first things that comes to their mind. So, how do we reshape some of those misperceptions that we touch base on, right? The misperceptions of partying, drinking. How do we bring it down to reality? Well, we do that through research, like all things. Higher education, specifically on alcohol and other drugs, they have really done a good job over the years of developing different systems within the schools and universities around health promotion and intervention and some forms of short-term treatment. But part of how we gather accurate information is through random surveys, right, which is part of one form of a research project. So nationally, American College Health offers to universities the ability to work with them and distribute biannual surveys. New Hampshire schools, most New Hampshire schools are engaged together and working collaboratively around a biannual survey that is conducted in the spring semester every other year. Not all universities in New Hampshire do that, but some do. And I'm going to present tonight a little bit of that information because I think it does a really good job historically and currently around what the realities are around college drinking. And I'm wondering if some of you might be surprised with that. Why is this data important? It's important so that we can challenge those misperceptions. It's important for students, like I said earlier, to understand the realities before they go to college. And actually, I'll back that up and say, as an 8th grader, as a freshman, as a sophomore, it's important for them to understand those realities so that they can really build on what it is that their experience is going to be like. This data is really important to help our universities to develop policies that are consistent with national policies and that help reduce risk. I'll add the piece around violence prevention. We have seen in our media, unfortunately, some mass shootings, some on college campuses, some outside of college campuses, and there's a lot of new systems in place in universities called care teams or behavior intervention teams, where universities get together the people on campus that can help with identifying and intervening with students. We have seen that mental health issues have been on the rise, clearly, for students in college settings, and we have seen some connection, not all connection, but some connection with non-treated students' mental health issues. If there's a violent tendency and there's a mental health issue and there's alcohol and other drugs, sometimes there's an escalation of the violence. So these care teams have come together to try and identify and support the communities around that. I think this data can be really good for this population. Probably more that we can be doing around data to help educate, but certainly an important aspect. And certainly the data is helpful for education efforts. So anybody in here have a college student, either went to college and, okay. For those of you, do you remember whether or not your child had to complete an alcohol and other drug module online before attending school? Yes? How many students did it? Do you know if your child did it? Well, yeah. Mine, my daughter, my youngest daughter had to do it. She attended St. A's, and she knew, because this is with the work that I did, so of course I was asking, inquiring to see if she completed it, but she knew she had to do it in order to not get a fine. So she was motivated by not having a fine. Some students are motivated because they're told they have to, or they'll have a policy violation. Other students are just told they have to. If you're a parent of an incoming freshman and they get that as an assignment, it's such a good opportunity. I would highly encourage you to encourage them to complete it, not hover, as we'll talk about, but encourage them to complete it, because it provides a first level foundation for them to understand all of what we're talking about and to really give them what the realities are and just some basic information. And so that's one of the ways that it's done. But it's also, the data is also used educationally throughout school, in different classrooms sometimes, through clubs and organizations, through training purposes on campus, etc. So if we talk about what everyone in here's perception might be of what a typical student on college campus drinking might look like, how many believe that most students report drinking 0 to 2 drinks when they drink or when they party? How about 2 to 4? How about 4 to 6? 6 to 8? 8 to 10? 10 or more? Okay. So all of your answers are pretty consistent with what most people, collaboratively will come up with. Here's the reality, besides the fact it might be hard to read it. The reality is that every college campus will have students who don't drink or drug. We'll have students who drink in what's called low-risk ways, have students that drink in high-risk ways, and students who drink to have their academics and their experience affected. This is New Hampshire data from 2017. Again, 2019 would have just been conducted. The majority of students collaboratively, and with this New Hampshire data, it includes, I'm hoping I'm going to remember this correctly, Colby Sawyer, St. Anselm's, Southern New Hampshire University, I believe UNH, the Tech, Riviere, Plymouth maybe. Do you know if I'm? I think so. Okay. That data is conducted each on these college campuses, and then aggregate data is pulled together so that we can look and educate students not just about their own but around their peers that are attending some of the other New Hampshire schools, which is fascinating when you have that conversation. So the majority of students, which the collaborative data says 62.9% report that they party, socialize, or go out, that they drink 4 or fewer drinks per occasion. That is huge. Now, sometimes I'll have students or others ask me, well, how do you know that that data is accurate? How do you know that someone didn't lie? My answer is, I guess you don't know if somebody took the survey and didn't. However, other data back, way back, a lot of the national data started in 1983. This data was started around that time, but New Hampshire started really compiling the data in 2000. Ever since I've been in the field, it has consistently been 4 or fewer drinks per occasion, which I think is incredible. If there was, inconsistencies by students, you would probably see that change. I think that speaks really good about the student community and what the majority believe. Now again, it doesn't mean other students don't drink in high-risk ways, right? So the other piece is that most people, as maybe a couple of you in here, believe though that others might drink more. So when asked that question on this particular survey as well as the other national surveys, what is the percentage of students who believe that other students, what they believe other students to drink? And for the most part, 44% believe their peers consumed 7 or more drinks when they partied. That was in 2015, and in 2017, students, 31.8% students believe that their peers drank 7 or more drinks per occasion. So we've got the reality of 4 or fewer drinks per occasion and the perception that their peers drink more. So if I'm a freshman or coming into freshman year, and I believe through all the media we spoke about, and I believe other people are drinking in higher risk ways, I might enter school believing what? That's expected, or that's what the norm is. And of course, who doesn't want to start off college feeling like they're part of the norm? So how we can help prevent students from not escalating in their drinking or drug use as they enter college is by helping to educate us and them on the realities versus the misperceptions. So when Animal House is played on TV, maybe having conversations about what those realities are. Or when the media or Instagram or some of the Facebook postings are there, maybe having conversations about those things. Does that make sense? Yeah, sure.
And I don't know if this is something you can talk about or relevant. I'm just curious, has this changed significantly from 20 years ago?
Yes, I would say.
Is drinking actually declining?
Yeah. Drinking has declined. Students who have, now remember, we're not talking about everybody, but the majority. Students who don't drink has actually declined. Without looking there, I think this last data report talked about 23-point-something students who don't drink. When I was educating years back when I first started in higher ed, I was talking about 14% of students reported entering college without drinking. So I have physically seen that piece. And part of the reason I believe is because students are getting more involved in college, in clubs and organizations, in different things to be involved and to gain their experience, right? So it's a great question, and there's actual data that I can talk with you after or show you that does show those differences. Yep, I have a couple of pieces on drug use. Drug use has actually, for the most part, decreased. There was a small rise in marijuana use from 2015 to 2017, not dramatically. So that's probably where we're going to start seeing a little bit of the rise. But some of the other drug use, if I'm remembering correctly, has actually gone down, certainly. And there's an ebb and flow in that depending upon what the drug is in the culture and the environment. But great questions. We're not doing data tonight, otherwise I'd give you a lot more information, but there's so much availability for you to look into, and I'm going to give you, make sure that you have the resources for you to look at. Okay, I think I mentioned 24.3 students report they do not party, but students believe that only 1.1% of their peers don't party. Again, that's a pretty big difference. And so this is New Hampshire data. I think I already went over that. American College Health, you can Google, you can see the entire report. They cover a lot of wonderful, wonderful health-related questions, mental health, other types of questions, whereas this focus, the New Hampshire Alcohol and Other Drug Committee data report focuses more on alcohol, other drugs, tobacco, sexual behavior, those types of questions that you'll see. But the ACHA Spring Survey in 2008 also came, the research showed that the majority of students drink 4 or fewer per occasion, broken down males to females. Males was 52.4, so females was 70.1% reported drinking 4 or fewer. So you're seeing more females with the lower amount of alcohol use than males, but there's still 52.4% of males saying they drink 4 or fewer drinks per occasion. Again, that's, I think, pretty significant. And the resource is right at the end for you to look at, and I can certainly talk with you after and make sure you have it. Yes?
Do they break that down by age at all? Like, I mean, when I went to college, the drinking age was 18. So I'm just wondering how the drinking age affects.
Yep. I think you can look at it. So yes, the surveys, when students fill out the surveys at the beginning, they're asked demographic information, male, female, age, and a lot of other cultural, ethnic questions. So it all can be broken down. And also it can be broken down into what organization do you belong. You're an athletic group, or you're in a fraternity or sorority. So what resident hall do you live in? So like breaking it down even further can help with some educational efforts to maybe focus on a variety of different cultures within that college community. Okay? So why is this important? We've talked about that. But how can it be helpful? So as I said earlier, and I don't certainly want to repeat myself, but being aware of the national data is important so we know the realities. Why is it important for us, separate from being aware of it, so we can start to watch our own attitudes around alcohol and other drug use, right? If we're talking to our own children during middle school and high school, and we use terms like, college is for partying. I hope when you go to college you're not going to party a lot. When I went to college, I would party a lot, or I smoked marijuana. Those types of conversations, not real helpful, right? So we need to watch our own attitudes and beliefs and really look at what those realities are versus the misperceptions. It's important so we can guide our child not to feed into those misperceptions, as mentioned earlier. Also, so that we can break down that media and social media as well, so we can talk about how that's not, always the case with what we see. And obviously, for us to ensure that our child can go off to college, that they are going to do the right thing that's right for them and what their own value systems are. So the big question in our media these days, I think, is what is a different type of a parent, right? So the question, I think, is important for all of us as we watch what's happening with some parents who are taking over certain behaviors for their children, is for us to take a look at what are our parenting styles. And I'll tell you, when I'm putting this presentation together and I'm thinking more about it, I can't stand up here and tell you that I might not fit into a couple of these categories every once in a while. So we're going to talk about what they are, but how they can be harmful to your child as they go to school for a variety of different reasons. So how many have heard of the helicopter parent? Okay, so the helicopter parent is the hoverer that began in about the 20th century. That hoverer was us making sure that our child is doing the right thing and then they're safe, right? Always coming from a good place. The hoverer, I think, has a bad rap. And there's also, there's a balance between when do we need to let go, but sometimes we need to hover. Sometimes we need to say, have you done your homework? Sometimes we need to say, who are you hanging out with for friends? So this isn't saying don't ask questions. This is saying this is a type of a parent personality that we've got to be careful of, so we're not taking over what their experiences could be. The second and more aggressive parenting style is called the snowplow parent. The media is also using the word lawnmower parent, if anyone's heard of the lawnmower parent, but snowplow parent, lawnmower parent is kind of used in the media related to wealthy, and snowplow is generally a parent who basically plows the street before the student has an opportunity to experience the street, right? Miller and Bromwich in 2019 defined what the best parenting style to be would be to prepare the kid for the road instead of preparing the road for the kid. And this is just a funny little picture of sometimes how the snowplow parent will literally pave the way and deal with all the obstacles instead of allowing their child to deal with them. And this could be happening while someone's at the college level, but it starts a lot earlier than that. So it's really important for us to be taking some of that inventory. Started a little bit later, I think through maybe what was happening in our communities and our environment. And it's a behavior that sometimes can breed each other, right? So if we're in a community or we're in a parenting group or a support group or we have friends, and we're saying things like, I'm going to be doing this for my student or my child, and it's plowing the way, then another parent might then begin to take that over, right? So it's pretty normal for us to get each other's, to follow in each other's footsteps. So I guess what I'm saying is it can also be helpful for us to look at it for ourselves, but also for our friends in our communities. So what are some of the behaviors? I just threw some down here. What do you all think? What would be an example of a helicopter parent, a hoverer, like related to, let's say, high school?
Monitoring the teachers.
What was that?
Emailing the teachers.
Emailing the teachers.
Or monitoring on the apps, like where your kid is at all times.
Yep, monitoring. Well, sometimes, again, we're going to get into what's appropriate, what's not, what fits in, when is it okay to jump in. Hovering, watching, checking in, asking detailed questions every day, all the time. Yes, checking Power School every day. Again, is it okay to do it sometimes? Yes. Every day, after every quiz, after every assignment, after every, probably a little bit of a hoverer. So those are some really good examples. Being involved in all of the child's activities. So we certainly all want to, and it's encouraged to be involved in community, to be involved as room moms or troop leaders or athletic coaches, but every one of them probably a little hovering, right? A snowplow parent, again, gets involved before the child has a chance to deal with their conflict. Does the work for a child. So maybe doing homework assignments, doing projects and papers. It's hard not to, right? When our child is struggling with anxiety and deadlines and not understanding homework, it's hard not to. There's a difference between sitting down with our child and working it through, or helping to talk through how they can get support from their teacher the next day, and doing it for them and handing in the paper or doing the homework assignments or calling the doctors. Now, we have to call the doctors, right, and talk and give the symptoms, but there comes a time when we have to say, time for you to call the doctor. Basically, the snowplow parent will interject in conflicts. So, what happens if a parent has some of these attributes, again, always coming from a good place, and then the student goes to school? That's going to be tough, right? Because do we think that a parent can email a professor and say, did they hand in their homework? No. Well, they can. They're not going to get an answer. Do we think that they can call a coach and say, hey, my son or daughter's not getting enough playing time in college? No. So there's things that prevent that, which can be frustrating as a parent, certainly. FERPA is the confidentiality, the federal confidentiality law for higher education institutions. So every student, and if they're 18 and older, needs to sign a waiver if those of you have gone to orientation with your child, or if you have been reading through some of the materials. That is a form that will allow communication from academics or any any offices, like advising offices or Office of the Dean of Students or Provost Office, etc., or athletics for that matter. So FERPA, everyone in colleges and universities, before communicating with a parent about a child or about a student, needs to check to see if that waiver is signed. Not all students sign the waiver. Separate from that, if a student is involved in a medical situation at health services and or in counseling, FERPA doesn't cover, but HIPAA or a federal confidentiality law does. So there's even a stronger confidentiality, okay? Another reason why we got to allow our students to start doing things on their own, so that, because we're going to have obstacles if that behavior isn't changed. What does it do? It takes away from the growth opportunity. One of the things that, for me anyway, is certainly very hard is to see one of my daughters struggle. It always has been. I don't want to see them in pain. I don't want to see them struggling with a class. I don't want to see them struggling with a friend or a situation. But in college, it's about guiding them to call the professor, to make the appointment and have the conversation with their advisor, to maybe talk to their RA or their resident life director about their room or the conflict with their roommate. They can call home, but we need to be guiding them back. Okay. There are times when it's appropriate to get involved. I always say, when I talk to parents, you know your child, and I always know my child. I'll know when it is that I need to step in, and when is it that I have to just cringe and allow them to struggle a little bit. Can't say I'm always perfect at it, but we know our child, right? So you know your child when they go to school, whether or not they're struggling. You know what their norm is. Maybe they isolate in their rooms. Maybe that's who they are. So if they're isolating in college, maybe there's not a concern. But if they're gregarious, if they're outgoing, if they're social, and they're at school, and they're not getting out of their rooms, and they're calling home saying, I'm really struggling, I'm not meeting any friends, there's nothing to do on weekends, and you guide them and encourage them and talk with them, and they're still struggling, maybe that's when you get involved, right? That wouldn't be considered snowplow. Snowplow would be saying, I'm going to take care of it. And I'm going to call these people, and I'm going to change your room, and pushing their way through to make the changes. Helping is different. So I just want to make sure that the audience understands that there is a difference. And at times, it's important to step in. If there's a disability, a need for accessibility services, or if there's any type of a disorder, and the student needs some assistance to get connected to the right department or the right services, they might need us to walk with them, to guide them on the phone, not to call, not to make the appointment, not to push, but to guide them and encourage them. Again, when they isolate, when there's a change of behavior, again, we know our children. So we know when there's a change, that's when it's time to say, okay, let me help you. So as part of helping not to be snowplow, but helping to still be involved, some tips would be to possibly set a time every week to have a chat. Say, hey, let's check in every Sunday, or let's check in every Tuesday, and ask questions to your child that are more open-ended. That says, tell me a little bit about your day, or what is it like in the dining hall, and who have you found yourself sitting with? Tell me a little bit about your classes, and who are the ones that you're connecting more with, and why. Not, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Because they might say yes, or they might say no, or they might not say anything, right? So if we allow this open question, it might allow that your child to engage a little bit more and help paint a picture, which is what we all want. We all want that picture. So there's just some tips on how to find out about what's going on in college while not being that snowplow parent or helicopter parent. Okay, does that make sense? I always encourage parents, as the summer goes on, who have students going to college, to review certain things so that you can help them to understand that these things are important. They weren't just little mild suggestions, they're important. So there's things like reviewing university websites to understand the scope, reviewing some of the online modules like I mentioned earlier, talking with them about what they can bring to college and what they can't. You should be getting lists at your orientation, so certainly helping to suggest for them to look at that, but together. It's important to be familiar, to help your student to be familiar with the clubs and organizations on your campuses, because one of the things that helps students succeed is getting involved. Research shows that all over the place. Getting involved as soon as possible with groups, with athletics, with clubs, with roles, different volunteer work. Those are the avenues that we're guiding students to help keep them moving in the right direction. Be familiar, review with your child the alcohol and other drug policies. They are different on every college campus. UNH's are a little bit different than New Hampshire College, Southern New Hampshire University, as well as St. A's. All these schools are a little bit different. So if there's one policy at one college, it doesn't mean when a student goes to visit their friend at another college, there's not going to be a policy violation. Okay? Understand what that means. What is a policy violation? Make sure your child understands that. 18 and older, most likely if there's a policy violation, as a parent, you're not going to receive information from the school. That might be different if it's a violent situation. It might be different if there was a hospitalization. But review what your policies are. Understand what education efforts are available to your student. If in the event your student is calling home and concerned, or you're concerned, be aware of the counseling services, the education efforts, and understand who you can connect your student to. It might be the Learning Center. It might be an accessibility service. It might be Res Life. It might be Community Engaged Learning or Community Services Department. And then review the code of conduct. A lot of students and parents don't know what that student conduct is. It covers things not only like alcohol and other drug policies, but bullying, violence, harassment. So important to understand, again, now before entering college.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So if your son or daughter is, as far as your understanding, is that they're not drinking or using drugs now, and they're telling you that they aren't intending to, do you still review the alcohol and drug policies over the summer?
Yes.
And just say, I know you're telling me that you're not going to drink, but we're still going to look at this together?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really good question. Very important too, because some students change their mind when they go to school. Remember, we talked about independence and decision making. If they make a decision, they make a decision. But if they don't have the information, then that's going to be a hard follow-up after the decision, right? So I would definitely talk with them about it. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk about what other kinds of conversations to have with your student surrounding the use of alcohol and other drugs. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, great. So having conversations, I would suggest not by text, obviously. I would suggest not by Instagram, but by face-to-face, the old-fashioned face-to-face conversation, maybe over dinner or out for coffee. What types of things to communicate? Things to communicate, as we mentioned, face-to-face. Validate the feelings that your child is having. It's okay to even talk about your own feelings. This is scary for me to have you go to school. But validate that it's okay for them to feel a little scared even though they're excited. Encourage the to-do list, like I mentioned earlier. Express the expectations about class attendance. Don't take that for granted. Sometimes independence comes, maybe I won't go to class, right? Talk about what they'll be missing from classes. Talk about your expectations as a parent, okay? Just because a student's 18 doesn't mean you don't have expectations as a parent. Should be communicating that with them. Encourage them to get involved, as I said. Most universities will have some type of a club fair at the beginning of the semester, usually second week of school. And it gets pretty large. If you look on your websites, you're going to see all the different innovative clubs and organizations that really mostly touches base with a lot of different personalities of students and different interests. Encourage them to get involved. Go to a couple meetings, figure out if that might be something they want to invest in. Get involved and guide towards services. Like I said earlier, be familiar with some of the student services on campus for them. And then call appropriate service or person if you're concerned and you need to get some guidance. So sometimes, for example, when I worked in our Wellness Center, students would be involved in counseling at home, and over the summer would call and say, we want to know more about your counseling services. We want to get them involved on campus. Can you tell me more about it? I'd say, come on over, meet the counselor, know what they look like, let's make an appointment. So think about any kind of other services that might help for them to get connected even before school, to help them with that transition, to be a little smoother, take some of those feelings away. Okay, but you can help guide your child around what services they can engage in and be connected to help them be more successful. Do not rely on text communication. Do not share your own war stories, like I mentioned earlier. Times have changed, but the reality is our children don't need to know the detail of what happened in college as a way for you to kind of, they're looking for your can I do this? So I'm not saying be dishonest, but there's information that can be given to our children in a way that is more positive and productive than in a way that's going to paint and feed into those misperceptions. Do not feed into misperceptions. Do not shrug off their feelings. Again, validate. Do not snowplow and call before your child has an opportunity to do it themselves. Okay? A lot of times when those room assignments are made, students will be upset. I don't want to be in that dorm. I don't want to be in that room. And parents call, right? Sometimes it all works out. Sometimes the room matching might not be in the nicest looking building, but the roommate system sometimes works out really well and sometimes doesn't. And our children need to understand who to go to, how to communicate in a way and advocate for themselves, because what's going to happen after they're out of our house, right? They're going to need to learn how to do it themselves. Coach too, I think I mentioned athletics, right? Remember that coaches also are developing a relationship with students. They're working on teamwork, they're working on self-worth and self-esteem, they're working not just on skill building. Coaches want to be a part of the conversation with their athletes. Us calling coaches and talking about playtime, probably not a really good thing, so be careful of that.
What are the to-do lists? What does that mean?
Like I think I mentioned earlier, like before going to college, sometimes students have this to-do list where they have to sign the FERPA, or they have to fill out their health waiver form, or they have to complete all the paperwork stuff. Yeah, so that come August, 15th, they're not so anxious about everything to get it done in a short amount of time. So encourage, monitor, help them to understand that it's important. And then the last don't. Minimize marijuana use due to the legalization. Now that's of course a whole other discussion. However, understand that even though marijuana is beginning to be legalized in some states, it is still a federal offense. And so on college campuses, they cannot allow marijuana use. So it is a policy violation even in a state that has marijuana legalized. Okay? They can lose federal funds, federal aid, because of that. So if there's medical marijuana or if there's the legalization debate, become familiar with it so you can educate your student in the right way. So specific alcohol and other drug communication, be aware of the data, discuss your thoughts and their thoughts on alcohol consumption. So this is where, I was mentioning earlier, kind of talk about, here are the realities, here are the misperceptions, here are our expectations. Allow them to share what their thoughts are. Listen to how alcohol is referenced in your family. Is it culturalized? Right? So if their conversations and social events are all related around alcohol, and there's the media who's portraying fun equals alcohol, then our students going off to college might begin to believe that that's the norm, right? So be careful of what kind of conversations on an ongoing basis happen, or what cultural environment we're creating. Know and reinforce that alcohol is a drug. Okay, alcohol is legalized, but it is considered a drug. And do not discount the dangers of drinking compared to other drug use. So that might require some education to understand it so you can talk with them the best way. And know there is a clear relationship between alcohol and drug use and academic performance, as clearly gathered through a lot of these research data reports that I mentioned earlier. So our ultimate goal, of course, is our students. Our students are, I say students because that's my higher ed language, but our children, our child is venturing off to a very new and different environment, excited, scary. Our role as parents need to be to help them to be successful, but by connecting them to all of those really important people in their lives and services that can help them to have a great experience. So S means not Sheila, it's actually student. But we want to connect them socially. We want to encourage them to connect socially. Social is really such an important part of our college experiences. We want to make sure that they're connected academically. That's why they're going to school as well, right? So we want to make sure that, again, they understand the expectations about class attendance and grades. We want to have connection at home. So don't go in the opposite direction of helicopter and snowplow and then not get in touch with your child, right? Create that ongoing communication. And I always put in wellness there because that's a place very dear to my heart. But students cannot be successful if they are not sleeping, eating properly, dealing with their emotional health, and engaging in low-risk activities, right? So those are the things that are equally all important that surround our children.